right. So our next speaker is ready. Let me introduce you. Let me remove this and quickly introduce you, Samson. Hi, welcome, Samson.
Yeah, hello. Good day,
Hello.
everyone.
So today we will discover the world of migrating a React application to Blazor. This is an interesting one. I'm looking forward to hearing more. So the stage is yours.
All right. Hi, everyone. I am Samson Amugo. I am a full stack developer and a Microsoft MVP. I'm really glad to be here. So, in today's session, we're going to be looking at how I got to migrate my open source application from React to Blazor. So, let's take a look at the application. So, this is what the application looks like pictorially, but let me access it from here. So this is the actual application. So what this application does is that it enables developers to easily define the configurations for their manifest.json file and also select the icon that will be used for their PWA. So after filling out these details, you can see that it's interactive. So after filling out these details, you can copy it by clicking here, and you see these details in your clipboard. And you can also select an image and submit. So once I click on the submit button, the server returns a zip file. And let me open the zip file. So this zip file contains the manifest.json file that was generated on the server, and also images that contains icons of different sizes for different screen resolutions. So you can see that this application is very, very important and needful in the PWA space. So I was like, okay, since we're talking about the bleeding edge stuff, Blazor comes to mind, and I decided to replicate this web application using Blazor. So when I was trying to replicate this application using Blazor, I also wanted to add some extra functionalities. Like I wanted users to be able to authenticate, to be able to store their files and retrieve them later on. I also wanted users to be able to delete these files. Then in terms of speed, I wanted the application to be able to render quite quickly on its initial rendering. And I also want the application to be interactive immediately. And also, I wanted to add a color picker. You can see in the existing implementation of this web application, there's no color picker. You have to manually input your color code. So the good thing about the new features in Blazor is that it supports auto-render mode. It also supports server-side rendering. So auto-render mode renders on the server with interactivity on the server using the Blazor server-side hosting model. And that is very, very essential for things like for things like SEO. So let's so let's talk about the migration. Let's look into the code. So when I was creating the templates, created the manifest gen project and also the clients projects here, but I created the state project myself. So I'll start out by explaining what the state project does. So the state project contains the states of my manifest.json file. So let me open what the manifest.json file looks like in the recently downloaded one. So this is what the manifest.json file looks like. It defines the settings and configurations for your PWA. So that is what the states in my project does. So this states just it maps to the configuration here. Then I also wanted to ensure that I have a React type of state management setting. So I introduced the event handler. So anytime any of the property here is being modified, it triggers the event handler to adjust based on the changes. So components that subscribe to the changes, that subscribe to these event handlers can change and make changes and can change and react to the changes in the states or properties. So the next thing I want to talk about is the client project. So in the client project, I'll start out by opening the entry file. So the entry file here is the program.cs file. You can see that I injected the app states here. And I also defined some services like the HTTP client service and yeah, so just these two. Then next, I love the fact that Blazor uses the component model. So in the component model, you can define your pages in terms of components. You can also make some of them routable by attaching the page attributes. So in the component model, I have the home. So this home, but before I go on, let me just execute this application so you can see what the recently created application looks like. Okay, so you can see this application is the Blazor built version of this other one. So it's the Blazor version of this application. And as you can see, there are some adjustments made. The color picker has been added, and also there's an icon here for authentication. So look at it here. So you can easily change the color. And you can see that this this editor pane behind this application is once you select an image, let's say I select this image and you click on generate, the server returns a zip file containing the icons and also the manifest.json file. And it doesn't persist those data. But if you want those data that are being generated to be persisted, you have to log in. So let's generate without logging in. So if I click on generate, the Blazor works on it. The server generates and processes the data. So if I click on this, you can see I still have the images here with generated icons of different sizes. So currently the user is not authenticated, but once I click on the login button, it tries to authorize or authenticate using the Microsoft authentication. So by default, I'm automatically logged in. So it might not bring up the pop-up for me to impute my username and password. Okay, that already did. So I'll click on my email. Now I'm signed in. So if I click on this S, I can click on history to see my previously generated manifest files and images. If I click on history, this stuff loads. It first displays a skeleton. So I've actually generated a file before and it persisted it in the database. So in this history route or history components, I can download a previously generated file. I can also delete a previously generated file. I can see how responsive it is and interactive. So I could go back to the home route. So this one is built with Blazor. So let's get back to the code. Now this is the home component, and the home component is routable. So you can see I have the page attribute attached here. Then I injected the states because actually the state is not used there. Then for this home component, I'm using the mod Blazor component. So the mod Blazor component here enables me to replicate this project using the material UI view. So let me get back to my code. Then I have the left pane. The left pane component is just this area here, this left section here, and the right pane component is this area. So you can actually have nested components in Blazor. And the good thing about this is you can make use of the auto render mode. So the auto render mode it generates on the server side, and the initial interactivity is done using the WebSockets via the Blazor server hosting model. And then on subsequent visits, it changes to WebAssembly for faster interactivity and less reliance on WebSockets. So you can see in this right pane, in my code section, I have some properties described here. I have the JSON code property. I have the file property, or file field rather. I have the JSON code field and the file field as well. Then I have the after render method described. I have to override the initial or the default implementation so that I can attach the event handler to the state. So anytime any of the properties here changes, this on data changed event handler is triggered, is invoked right here. It's invoked right here. And this changed method is triggered to trigger rendering of the components. Then I have the left pane here. The left pane contains the fields. So this is where I have the file picker and the fields for various properties. Not so much going on here. Um, then then let's get to the server side of things. So in the server side aspect, I have this folder, the minimal API folder. In the minimal API folder, this is where I have different routes using minimal APIs. So I have these routes defined to handle various API requests from the client. So I have this map post endpoint. So this map post endpoint, what it does is once it receives the file, once it receives the data from the form here, it converts it and sends it to this logic, the manifest generation logic. So in this route, in this map post route here, in this route one, I'm making use of the new feature of the form attribute. So the form attributes, the new feature allows you to here. So this is the class I defined for the type. So a new feature allows you to define the name of file properties, and then it maps to these names in your file to map to this property here. So this JSON content has to map to the name attributes of this app name field. Sorry, has to be mapped to the name attributes of the field that contains this. So I'm not actually sending these properties individually to the server. I'm actually like serializing it into a single string and passing it into a form. So that form contains a name attribute called JSON content. Then for my file, I'm passing it using an upload file type. And the name of that file attribute is image. So the form attribute maps to those names and then enables you to manipulate that data right here. So you can see we have the serialization thing going on here. So it serializes the JSON content. It serializes the JSON content into this app state so that you can easily manipulate it using the app state type. Then it sends it to this manifest generation logic. So let's open the manifest generation logic. So this class, what it does is that it defines various methods and various processes involved in generating the zip file. So in the execute process method, it creates the folders, it creates the images, it writes the app state into the right manifest, and it zips the content. So that is what this manifest generation logic does. Then let's get back to the generate manifests API. So I also made use of an endpoint filter. So this endpoint filter executes the route first, and after executing the route, it deletes the file, meaning once this data is being sent to the server does not store the data in the file directory, does not store it in the file system. So for my file persistence, I'm making use of the database. I'm actually storing the data as bytes in the database. And you could ask why I did that. I just wanted to ensure I make use of a single API to manipulate my files. And since the file size is negligible from research, it won't really have much effect on my database. Then let's get back to the program.cs file. So in this program.cs file, I had to make use of the route group builder to create the custom group that attached to this upload route. Then there are some things that I have to hint about. So actually working on this and creating this custom authentication system wasn't really straightforward, because by default the templates, once you select authentication in the templates, it makes use of the identity UI to scaffold your authorization and identity pages. But I needed to create a custom one. So for me to create this custom one, I had to edit and hack through the identity files. So these are the identity files. I had to edit and customize them to suit my own need. So my plan currently, this project is not being hosted, but I plan to host it and replace it with the existing one. And I think that will also help to create and to create more awareness for Blazor and also promote Blazor entirely. So currently this project is being used all over the world, and it has amassed a good amount of users. So I have about 1.5k users in the last 30 months that are using this open source project. So I plan to replace this using the Blazor version of this project. Then one other thing you have to take note of is, since I'm working with static site generation, you might ask yourself, how am I able to actually get this data initially? So like, how am I able to render this in the initial rendering or the initial paint of this web application? So I had to manually generate it, log it, and then paste it. Like I had coded this section in, let me open the file. That should be the right pane. So here I had coded this section here, and it wasn't that hard to hard code because I used a library. So I made use of the Prism library. So the Prism library enables me to easily highlight or have this code-like editor feature on a web page. So I first of all logged it out using the Prism library, then copied the generated HTML file and pasted it here. So during the initial rendering of this code, of this web page, what it does is that it renders this one. Then once interactivity becomes available, it now renders the interactive version of this, which by default looks exactly the same, but you might not know. So these are some of the things you might have to consider when working with the auto render mode. So I think that is all for now. And is there any question?
Hi, Samson. There's no questions at the moment. Are there any other resources you have to share?
Okay, so let me just tidy up some things and answer some questions that you might possibly have. So let's say, what are the reasons for choosing to migrate to Blazor? So one of the reasons is you might want your entire stack to be heavily tilted towards C#. So that might be a good consideration. And also you might want to, utilize the speed and performance of C# via WebAssembly. So that's another thing. Then how does Blazor state management compare to React? So Blazor state management is quite easy. So for someone that, if you're thinking about, passing a state through multiple nested components, it's pretty easy in Blazor. You can make use of cascading components. You can just make use of the normal dependency injection that is being used vastly in the server side of things, which makes it quite easy for someone to pick up Blazor and work with states. Then another thing here is considerations to make when deciding on the render modes. So let's say you want to, relieve your client from heavy processing. You could decide to make use of the server-side rendering mode. Or let's say you want an easier debug process. You also want to use the server-side hosting model. Or let's say you want faster initial loading time. I want to utilize the server-side hosting model. Then I think that is almost the opposite or the reverse for WebAssembly. And the particular rendering mode that tries to bring the best of both worlds is the auto render mode. So for the initial rendering of the auto render mode, it's renders on the server and creates interactivity using the server-side hosting model. Then on subsequent visits, it makes use of the WebAssembly, which reduces latency, increases interactivity speed, and also uses dependency on WebSockets. So how easy is it to add authentication? If you don't want to, so let's say you don't want to depend so much on the identity UI, then you might need to do a bit of hacking and manipulation to get your authentication done. But assuming you're okay with the default identity UI, then it's pretty easy for you to make use of that out of the box. So that is all for now. If you want to learn more about Blazor, I'd advise you check Blazor's documentation. It does a pretty good job at explaining some of these concepts. So to catch up on me, you can reach out to me on Twitter, on my blog, or via LinkedIn. Thank you.
Awesome session. Thank you so much. It was so nice to see hands-on coding live. It was so refreshing. We really appreciate you joining .NET Conf, and hopefully we'll see you next year.
All right. Thank you.